All right, welcome guys. Today I have an incredible guest with me. I have Roman Prokopchuk with us today. And so please welcome Roman. Hi, Roman.
Hey, thank you for having me on the show today.
Absolutely. So, Roman, first thing I'm going to ask you is before we really dive into why you're here today, can you give our listeners and those that are watching two huge points that they'll be able to get from our show today?
Yeah, so I mean, usually I like to share some of the things that I went through. So, in terms of immigration and career pivot journey, and then a family journey, which started with multiple miscarriages and then led to becoming foster parents. Which in turn, my wife and I have fostered 25 children since June of 2018.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I think, what connected me to you because I also went through fertility issues for a really long time. I've been in the foster system, I was a case manager, and I also lost a child through the system. So I think that's what connects me with you. And I think your story is absolutely incredible. So, can you absolutely kind of take us through that journey that brought you to the point you are now? Because you've been on a ton of different podcasts throughout your journey. And so, yeah, can you just give us a little bit of that?
Yeah, so kind of journey started. I immigrated to the US in 1990 from Lviv, Ukraine. Ukraine was still under the Soviet Union. Six other family members to a two-bedroom apartment in New Jersey. Went to school here, kind of fast forward in terms of college. Thought I was going to go the Marine Corps officer route, got sick before kind of going to Quantico for that training. Found out I had an issue that I could have died from. I ended up not going that direction, but I was a criminal justice major. So last semester of college, I interned with the Secret Service on the counterfeit currency squad, held a top secret federal clearance. And then basically, I graduated and the recession hit in 2008. So state, local, federal agencies froze hiring. So I was kind of screwed in that sense, looking for jobs for months and months. Nothing came up. I was down and depressed. The only thing that really kept me sane was going to the gym, clearing my head that way. I met someone at the gym that they proceeded to tell me after my work, I'd come out to my car, I have something that may help you. So I said, why not? So they opened their trunk and handed me a packet about search engine optimization and said, read this, go online, brush up on it. You can do it from my company. And that's how I kind of got started in digital marketing, which led to three director roles on the agency side, working with a bunch of Fortune 500 clients, and then founding my own agency in 2012. And then in this whole journey, I got married and decided, with my wife, we wanted to start a family. And then, in the last 3.5 years, we went through five miscarriages, spent, over $100,000 out of pocket, and then thought creating our family or helping kids through the foster care system, becoming foster parents, resource parents, as we're called in some states, was a great, alternative or option because I feel like there's always a need for good foster homes.
Right.
So we got licensed May 31st of 2018, June 1st, next day, two children show up, our first
Oh,
placement. They were positioned as we would be able to adopt them. They were positioned as the case was moving towards reunification. Obviously, in the foster care system, things can change overnight. We had them for a year and they ended up getting reunified. The mom did everything that, she had to do. So we're proud of her in that sense, but it was still hard for having children for a year and, having them go back. So since then, we've had 25 children. Currently, we have five under 3.5, which
oh,
is interesting. So four are in school, and the 5-month-old baby that turned five this month, my mother-in-law is actually watching while I'm working and my wife is at work. So that's kind of where I'm at.
wow. Like I had three boom, boom, boom after, for fertility and everything. And it was like triplets. I could not imagine having five. And because of their foster children, like you have so much to do. You have court hearings, you have visitations, you have all this stuff depending on their situation. So how do you guys juggle? Like, how do you have a successful digital agency, have a successful relationship, have a successful dadhood, have a successful you time? Like, how do you balance it all, Roman? Like, I'm in awe of this.
Yeah, And then my podcast, in terms of the
Oh yeah, I
creation of
didn't
the
even mention
content.
that.
No, no, no. I didn't want to like plug it, but that's a lot. It's a labor of love in itself in terms of the creation and promotion. And yes, you understand kind of those pain points coming from, the side in terms of the foster care system. So my wife actually was home when this whole COVID thing lockdown started. And at the time we had 4 children. So everything moved to Zoom. So my wife was facilitating 22 hours of Zoom calls a week, which is a job in itself, with caseworkers, nurses, law guardians, and everybody in between. And it just got out of control. So yes, it gets kind of hectic. The only thing that really keeps it in line is a schedule or a routine. And if I didn't have my wife, which is the one that's a super planner, I wouldn't really be able to do it.
Oh, like, yes, Roman, I was getting to your podcast as well, because your podcast is what I listened to it and I've been a long follower. And then Clubhouse happened, and lo and behold, you popped up. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I reached out to you because we were in a room together. And I'm like, okay, this is a big ask. You're like up there of who I want. And I know I've been on many rooms with you where that is what I don't think a lot of people understand, is that we a lot of times put people on these pedestals thinking that they're unattainable, and really they're amazing, incredible, just people that have these incredible stories. And it's those people that I think I connect with, and I find myself in the same space as them, is because they are true real people that are just great human beings. And I truly think that that's what you are, Roman. And you say it a lot of times in those rooms that um it left me speechless. I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah, and I try to be raw and real in those rooms too. A lot of them are like reasons behind the show, or like what you share as a guest or what you went through. And like we're speaking right now, and what I saw a void in, a lot of men didn't share those experiences from a male perspective, how it is to be a foster dad or going through, especially like loss in terms of
right.
miscarriages, with, people bottle that up, which I did for a while. Then I kind of was comfortable to speak about it. So if you do have a platform and you can share, there's at least one person you can help out there. And I think, like you said, anyone's attainable. Well, Clubhouse allows us to do so too, in terms of rooms with people that you've listened to or
Mhm.
seen on TV or seen playing sports, and they're all human. And it's humbling. I don't consider myself like that, but I, in those rooms, try to add as much value as possible through my experiences, through my business things, and really not ask for anything in return. And doing it like that, a lot of business and media opportunities have, came out of that, because I'm trying to be genuine and actually be impactful with people and what they're going through as well.
And I think you are, Roman. I don't think you have to try to be. I think you just are. It just comes through your passion for foster kids and your passion for a platform that you have for fertility or infertility, and for the foster care and everything that you're doing. Your podcast is that great avenue. Right now, your voice on Clubhouse is that huge avenue. So I'm going to ask you, who are you? Like who
Um,
like who are you? And I know you're like, that's a weird question, but um I do watch you. I watch YouTube, and I watch and I listen to your podcast. So, you're not necessarily the business guy, but you are this person. So who are you?
yeah, like I said, the business part, I could be focused on it, and I do a lot of business and marketing shows, but I feel like my passion is to bring about foster care reform and talk about topics that people don't necessarily talk about, and that personal level actually like goes a lot further. That's why I don't know. I obviously we were in rooms together. I don't know if you were in the room that I host late night. It's called Podcast After Dark on Clubhouse, and that's like a low key, like people get into like real stuff and things like that. And that's what I try to kind of expose with the right guest, if it's the right guest on my show. So I kind of carried it over there and have a safe place and an open stage for people to share that. So I think I'm more like, a heart-led entrepreneur that wants to see people around me rise up and have good mental health, and people actually like care about what they're saying. But from the business side, technically I can be talking about like digital marketing
I'm
that I've
sure.
done for 13 years, More so, but like you said, I mean, one time I went on a business show, it was supposed to be an hour of strictly business and podcasting, and it was 40 minutes about me being a foster dad. So like people are interested in those conversations, and a lot of what they get and what they see is on TV and stereotypes. So I think it's important to educate what it's actually like for foster families and what foster kids are actually going through in the system as well.
Absolutely. So, how many I lived in when I was a case manager stuff, I lived in Indiana. And so that was basically if you're going to be a foster parent, you will end up adopting that child just because, there was such a need for foster parents and the unification was just it was very low. It was horrible. So have you and your wife been able to actually adopt any of the kids that you have fostered or thankfully they've all been reunified?
Yeah, so that's a great question. New Jersey pushes kind of reunification
Mhm.
over everything and pushes more towards kinship, regardless of what the situation. So I feel like a lot of cases that I've had, they just want to kind of buffer that higher reunification rate, and the children went back. Yes, there were several kids that we said, and then the case was far enough that we were asked, if this case moves towards reunification, are you willing to adopt? And we said yes, but it's never really happened like that. There was always extensions, and eventually it was whatever was done was good enough for the kids to go back. So I don't necessarily agree with some of the processes because the recidivism rate is high, and we've had things like, don't be upset. You'll probably see the kids again. They'll be back in the system. Well, why would you want them back in the system if you're trying to mend the situation they came from and mend them in terms of what they've been through therapy and other efforts? So why would you even say that? Because in order for them to end up back in the system, they either have to see something, have an unsafe living environment, or something happen to them again. So there's just like things that, kind of irk me with the whole process, but I'm doing my best to kind of bring light to it.
Absolutely. I think that is so, so important. And we could get in a whole long discussion about, the journey I had to take as well. So, so Roman, I want to make sure I ask this correctly. So what or how do you and your wife, because it takes a toll, trust me, it takes a toll. How do you guys create a safe space, not only for your guys' relationship, but also for the kids? Because um, a quick example, when I lost that child, my youngest son was at that age and he said to me, "Mommy, when will you give me back?" So how do you guys as a couple save that space? And then how do you help the kids that are currently in your care get through that? Because in the back of the mind, they might be thinking that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's kind of well, like the first placement we had was like a scared straight thing that we had them for a year. They were like your picture perfect kids, and it would have been amazing, obviously, adopting them, but we're
Yeah.
happy that one of the few cases where we thought it was a good move to reunify, and they're well taken care of and everything is going well. But it was one of those things we had to take some time off. So we went on a family reunion. My wife's family's from Hawaii, so that was a nice place to go for 2 weeks. And then basically, we went back. We visited her dad. I was in LA. Then we were in Vegas to visit her dad. And then a week later, I was in Florida for a month for work and conferences. And then after that, we decided to, start doing it again. So time really kind of helped. It didn't mend, but it made it more bearable. And then taking time for ourselves. Obviously, it's super hectic right now with 5 kids. So try maybe every month, every 2 months, have somewhat of a date night or somewhat time to ourselves. But it's just kind of reconnecting and recalibrating and just like really thinking about why we do it in the first place.
Right. And then as far as the kids, have you ever had one of your kids be scared to leave your safe environment or or like in my situation to have then another kid say, "Well, when are you giving me away?" Like I don't think kids understand. And it wasn't my choice that I had to give him away. That was just the judge's order. And it's heartbreaking. So how has that happened to you and how do you handle that?
Yeah, so majority of our children were toddlers, so in preschool, like 5 years or younger. So they kind of understand because as you know, like the way visitation goes, when you know visitation moves to overnights, or at home overnights, like unsupervised, you know
Yeah,
reunification is closed. Probably, I would say based on the cases we've experienced, 4 to 6 weeks.
right.
So we try to prepare the kids. I don't think that the Division of Child Services does a good job to prepare the family or the child in terms of therapy because we've seen a lot of abnormal behavior when the child is first taken to the location where the trauma happened. It starts triggering things, and it's a common sense thing, even though I'm not, a psychologist or a therapist. But people within the division don't understand that. I'm like, why aren't they getting services or therapy in terms of like talking through into, are you okay with being back, what are you feeling, both by themselves, how the parents are feeling or guardians on themselves, and then having group therapy so they can mend. And then sometimes we've gotten, oh, when they're reunified, they'll start getting therapy, but that's not the right time. So
Mhm.
I feel like there's gaps in that sense too. We try to prep the kids and let them understand as best as possible, like, you're going to go home to mommy and daddy and you're not going to be here anymore, but if you need help, you can always reach out to us or have your mommy and daddy. So really kind of prepare them in that sense, but they can only understand so much at their kind of
Right.
age.
Right. And I know when it happened to us, and I don't know how they do it in New Jersey, but for us, and it was horrible. I got to say my goodbyes in a room playing toys, and then I had to walk out of the room and shut the door. He was left in that room by himself screaming. It was the worst experience of my life. And then thank gosh, because a therapist was already involved, because of the trauma he had experienced. Um, we had a couple more sessions, and we her biggest advice was to do a death box. And you know what I mean, like, to try to, I don't know how to get this across, but it was to say goodbye in a healing way. So have you heard of that in like any of that type of how to, I guess, heal your heart from this child that you've had for a long time that is being reunified or going elsewhere?
Yeah, so one thing that we've done, we've created like email accounts and the kids' names, and when you
Oh,
write to the email account, so when they get of age, and if we can track them down, we get them the password to it, and then
oh,
we have like a CC dummy account in case like the parent or guardian deletes it. We have a backup to basically give them a capsule, like sending them pictures around like the times that we experience together, things that we feel after they leave, and stuff like that. But I get the notion of that, but I feel like if I totally forgot that pain, because it's truly cruel because we go through that ringer every time, even if a child stays in our home for a week, we still care about them and
yeah,
worry about where they are and what they're going through. So I feel like if I completely shut that aspect off, I would probably not be as effective as a foster parent and really connecting with the kids. So that part of me is still there. Maybe I cope with it a little bit better, but I'm always experiencing kind of that pain or loss every time a child leaves.
right, absolutely. And I think that's important. And for those that are actually watching, I get emotional with it because for me, it's always been a hard thing. Even when I was a case manager, every time that child, reunified and stuff, I just felt like, oh, I had a piece of them and I may never get to see them again. And so, because I want to check up on them, I want to make sure that they're okay. And if I can have a piece in their life later on, then I think that's extremely important. So, with that, Roman, let's hop off foster for a second and go to the fertility piece of your journey and how this happened. So, as a male, I think you're absolutely right. We don't talk enough about fertility. How did the fertility aspect impact you? Because so much is placed on the female and what it does to them, but actually it has significant role in a man's life. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you kind of bottle it up. Obviously, like the normal response, usually from most men, is not necessarily share their feelings. And in terms of like Eastern European culture, it's very like stoic. You don't show your emotions very much. So I have that component to kind of over or get through and kind of overtake, because I mean it will affect my relationship with my wife. But it's one of those things where you're feeling the same emotion per se. Obviously, you're not going through that physical trauma or
Right.
went through it, but it also, you're kind of helpless because you don't know necessarily how to help your partner or be there for your partner. So you're helpless in that sense. And then if you're holding it in, then my wife feels like that I don't care, or I don't feel as strong about it. So it's just kind of like that internal conflict.
Mhm.
And it really has been tough. Like, we've talked in terms of like therapists and different people that just talk through it, but it's always there. And the other tough thing, two of the miscarriages happen on back-to-back Christmases. So now that negative experience is tied to Christmas, regardless how joyous it is.
Sure.
Christmas is theoretically ruined in a sense for like the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, my heart breaks, and I'm so thankful that I was able to connect with you and hear your journey about that, because you're right. There's not a lot of guys that are talking about it, their aspect of it. So, is do you do you have a group? Do you support other guys going through this? Do you encourage other guys to reach out to you? I mean, is there support groups out there now for guys that are going through fertility? I mean, what's your platform as far as this? Is it just getting on podcasts and really just speaking it out there, or how can you make the greatest impact?
So locally, like I've been involved in certain things, and like you said, last year I've done 75 interviews on different shows and on different topics. A lot of them were specifically focused on foster parents, adoptive parents, parents that have experienced loss through miscarriages or otherwise. So like speaking directly to those audiences and then sharing that with audiences that may have not heard about it. So being featured in different publications in terms of highlighting that as well. But I mean, I'm thinking like into the future to use my platform
Yeah.
a little bit more and amplify that messaging. But right now, I haven't really worked with like specific nonprofits or created a group, but it's something that obviously I'm vocal about and I'm happy to explore.
Absolutely. I would think that, have you thought about a book? Like, do you ever think about, like, writing your journey, you and even your wife's journey together, and how you went from this to now helping 25 foster kids, and it's going to be well over 25 in your lifetime. I mean, I know that it's going to be well over 25. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I have. I've that's why I think it's important for people to share their stories because, I started really going on interviews. January of 2019 was really where I started sharing who I am in general, all aspects. And before that, I, thought my story wasn't good enough, or, people wouldn't want to hear about it. But you would be surprised on how you can help people and how you resonate. And if you do share it on a platform like a podcast, you can impact people all over the world. So yes, I've thought about a book in terms of helping with some of those things, and I've also thought about a children's book, which like each child that's been here, I have different illustrations they've done and stuff like that. So just writing about the kids and then including their pictures as illustrations, and then possibly starting like a charity that I can possibly go back, find them, and help them with like college tuition or something like that.
Oh, like, Roman, like, I have a jacket on because you can see my goosebumps on my arm. That is absolutely incredible. And I hope that by you being on this show, by you being on so many shows, I hope that someone will reach out to you and be like, I will be your illustrator. I will be this. I will be that. I will get this nonprofit with you. I will do all this, because I think, oh, can you imagine how many people, how many kids you can impact? I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, as you know, there's a lot of kids in the foster care system and a lot of kids that age out that are, basically the guardian is the state when parental rights are terminated and the children aren't adopted. So the older you get, the harder it is technically statistically to adopt. And then if you age out, if you look at prison populations, a large percentage are kids that were in the foster care system, kids in gangs, people getting trafficked, getting into drugs. If that happens for a child that ages out, the percentage of that being the reality is very high.
yeah, absolutely. I did an internship in a prison, and so I specifically worked on a unit, and my thesis, my end project was about a lot of what we're talking about. And so I get it, and it's tough and it's hard. And one of my favorite stories is there was this kid that I asked why he was in there, and in his culture, he didn't understand, like he didn't even think, but he had gotten picked up for a speeding ticket, but in his culture that was going to be bad. And his parents owned a press, like a newspaper. He went and he burned it down, and he didn't understand the ramifications of that. And so he was so close. Anyways, it was heartbreaking to hear, what had happened in his life and stuff. So yeah, it's incredible. So Roman, you have an incredible podcast, and your podcast has all different topics. What is your favorite topic on your podcast, 100%, that you could literally have a thousand shows on? What's the number one topic on that podcast?
Yeah, so every conversation is kind of guided by four questions, and then that conversation naturally expands and goes in a direction it naturally goes. But I like when people bring up kind of redemption stories, stories that they've fallen into some dark places and how they were able to get out of them, things they've experienced in their personal life that then connected to how they dealt in business, and things that they've dealt with that are kind of like the hurdles in life that people may or may not over time experience. And I think all of those things you learn from, if it's a failure, if it's grief, you learn from it. Obviously, you don't forget it. And if it's a learning experience, it's never a failure or something that's like staying with you or kind of keeps you down if you treat it like that. So I think anything where it's a redemption story, if it's a story kind of hope, excuse me, I always try to highlight that. And I think that adds the most value because I think that resonates the most with me as a host, and I think with the audience as well.
No, I absolutely agree. So um, currently you have obviously these really young, incredible kids, but have you had older foster kids then, I'm assuming?
So we take respites. I'm sure you know what a respite kind of like taking children for a short amount of time to help other foster families out in terms of them going through something medically, or they go out of state or out of the country and they're unable to take the children. So the oldest child we've had was 12 years old
Okay.
for a week, which was sad because he connected and bonded well with us. He was actually going to be reunified soon, but when it came down to the day that he needed to leave, he said, "Can I stay here?" And he like started to cry and stuff.
Oh,
But like he had a good time and he bonded and connected well because we do stuff with the kids. I mean, I'm 36, so I'm not young and I'm not old, so I'm fairly active. Like I'll take him places, all the kids, parks, different activities and stuff like that. And the family he was in was a little older. They didn't necessarily like connect with them in that way, which is fine, but he just kind of longed for that kind of connection.
well, sure. So how do you and your wife, and she's not here, so I'm asking you specifically. So how, when you bring these older kids in that obviously aren't toddlers, what's a process? How do you make them feel welcome and safe and secure, and something that they may not understand or know because they've never had that? So how are you able to do that?
Yeah, so one, first we were hesitant to take somewhat older children in general without knowing their history. So if they have a history of like violence or abusing other kids or anything like that in their case, we refuse to subject the possibility of something happening with our younger kids. But, when we get them, it's just kind of the energy in the house. It's low key. We're friendly. Anything you want, like just ask us. I know that there's been crazy situations where, like, resource and foster parents put like locks on fridges and said, you can't take this, and you can't take that. I've heard stories like that. But, in New Jersey, you get a stipend. You don't get paid to be a foster parent. That stipend actually supposed to be going to the child in terms of activities, clothes, food, different other things. So whatever we got, we spent it on experiences and activities. Obviously, with the whole COVID and lockdowns and everything else, we were limited to some of the stuff that we do. So we took him. He said he's never been golfing, so we thought Top Golf would be fun. He enjoyed that. I took him to get a new headphones, some video games. I played video games. So really connecting what that child's activities are and what they like to do to begin with to make them feel safe and comfortable. And they open up a lot when you find that commonality.
And what happens, Roman? I'm going to touch back on another thing that you just brought up in a minute about the stipend, but what do you do when and I'm sure you've seen this, when you're able to provide these experiences for these kids that's never had them, but the reality is you have parents that want to be reunified, but are like, wait a minute, you're giving them all this, I can't ever give them all that. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think there's a case of that a lot because we see the situations that they come from. And one child we actually had to move to another home based on him being violent to the other children in our
Right.
home and destroying things. And he went to a good home, but it's the same thing. He had like a orphan Annie type experience. So he went to a town that's like a multi-million dollar town in New Jersey, and he went where the street is called Millionaire Row. So the
Oh
kid is in
no.
a mansion. He has every amenity. They fly him out to like Colorado to go skiing. They take him to
Oh,
this place and that place, which is, we have a nice home. We had a pool. We had fun in the pool all summer. We've done things, but there's one other biological, well, adopted child that that family has, and they can focus more on his different, things that he has to deal with, like oppositional defiance disorder. So he shouldn't really be around younger kids. So he's getting a more tailored experience that benefits him in terms of like what he needs to work with and how he, has to kind of
right.
live productively and deal with some of the stuff he
Yeah.
has going on. But we thought about that, like you literally have every amenity and you're flowing out left and right. So I don't know if he's actually going to want to go back because the dynamic with his mom kind of favored his younger brother more than him. And we've seen that relationship. So I think it's just going to be hard. And he's in a really good school system, a private school, and he's going to go back to an inner city setting where the education system may not be as good or, as in terms of the advantages and things that are available to him. So we do think about that as well, but it's just one of those things where we try to bridge the gap. So
Right.
yeah, resources be a resource to the biological parents or guardians, obviously if they're of sound mind and they're not like violent or disrespectful or threatening, that we try to be a resource if they need something. We'll pay out of pocket for clothes or food or anything for those children. So we're always available in that sense as well.
Yeah, I think I always wonder about that. That's got to be hard. And so I'm going to go back to the whole stipend issue because, there's a stigma, I truly believe that this happens, that people become foster parents for the money. And I know that when I had a child in my care, I didn't get money. Like, I didn't get money at all because they were going after the parents, and the parents had to pay me. But, well, one was incarcerated, the other one was in and out of incarceration and stuff. And so I didn't get that money. And then when I started getting paid per se, it went into a savings account that it could be there for that child. Um, when they were able to have it. It wasn't. And then what I did with it is I sent money to prison for mom so she could have a calling card so she could call him and talk to him, even though he was, younger, he was a toddler, but just to hear her, voice. And so that's what I did with, the money when they caught up and was able to send, what, $20 a month every 3 months or 4 months. So that stigma is out there. What do you say about that? Because I think there's a lot of people who want to be foster parents or who might do it not in the best motives.
Yeah, I think state to state is also different. I've connected with some foster parents in other states, and when I tell them what the stipend per child is on average in New Jersey, they'll say it's like double that. And New Jersey, well, most cases you're only allowed 4 foster children, and anything past that, you need to get like permission or waivers or write-offs.
Mhm.
So I don't know if every state has that. Like there have been abuses in some states I've heard of where people will take a lot of children and obviously keep that for themselves. But I mean, it's one of those things where it's like not a career or not a job. This is like a calling, and you're doing it like in terms of a labor of love, because some of the things you experience, no compensation can cover that. Some of the things you see. So if you're treating it like, you're going to get paid and you're going to get some financial benefit, you can really be doing other things that you can, make a lot more money from than, taking care of a human being and helping that human being thrive, which you should be doing regardless if you're taking a foster child in your home.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. Completely agree. So, so Roman, as far as your life, if you and your wife are blessed with children, how will that change the dynamics of having foster kids? Because I think that is a concern that, foster parents have. Well, what happens if I become pregnant? You know what I mean? Is it a personal thing, or is it um a universal, common ground of of being able to have a natural child and then having a foster child? Like, what's your view on that?
Yeah, so we're actually doing another cycle. So
Okay.
I guess because we did a egg retrieval and then we had
Mhm,
embryos, obviously from that, and we have embryos in cryo. So we're going to do another egg transfer or
mhm.
embryo transfer, excuse me, in I would say in the next month or two. So that's something we considered. We
Okay.
actually one of the children we that came in our home in September
Mhm.
came straight from the hospital. So the child was 2 weeks old because he spent 2 weeks in the NICU because he was born 4.5 pounds with drugs in his system, and now he's this little chubby happy boy. Actually, the date of this recording, he turned 5 months.
Oh,
So hopefully, we're praying, and based on how we're seeing the cases going, hopefully that moves into adoption. And what we're seeing is, we don't know, we said we don't know if we can love our biological child, if we do have a biological child, as much as we love him now. So
oh,
it's kind of like the reversal of that, or like, the specifics of that. But I mean, we're fairly loving people in terms of, opening up our hearts. So I think we can, equally kind of show love or share love between, and we're not going to obviously treat it like, he's adopted, he's biological, they're both going to be our children.
yeah. So okay, that just gets me emotional. But I'll reel it in and be professional about here. But so as the kids get older, Roman, what's your opinion on telling them or not telling them? Do you tell them that they're adopted, and do you agree that they need to go out and search for their their parents, or not? Like, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so so the child that we're hopefully are adopting is
Mhm.
African American, and actually 19 out of the 25 children we've had were African American. So obviously that's going to be a conversation in itself. Why,
Yeah, absolutely.
why don't I look like you? And yeah, we're open to that as long as like we're completely honest with the situation. In this situation, three siblings of the child we currently have been adopted out, in terms of the mom is homeless, has been a drug
Mhm.
addict for like 10 years. They don't know where she is, or she
Right.
doesn't have a cell phone. She can't be found. She can never get the
Mm.
child back. She identified a few people as a potential father. And the situation is that there's a fourth sibling that's in foster care that's probably going in the same route. So it's going to be a combination of knowing the situation that he came from, as well as the fact that he has biological siblings out there that have experienced the same thing.
Yeah. So are you a proponent of, because there's all this centralization on TV and everything. So are you a proponent for pushing them to find their biological parents, or are you just supporting them if they choose to do that? Because you see TV as well, and you see everything out there. Like, why didn't anybody ever tell me? And so, I mean, will you push them to do that, or just kind of let them on their own?
Yeah, I think it's their own journey. Obviously, we'll be
Mhm.
as open as transparent. And I've seen situations and I've interviewed people where they needed that closure. They know that they've been raised and loved in terms of
Right.
being adopted in that family, but they just want closure or say something to that person that either gave them away or lost parental rights. So I'm open to that, but I don't necessarily want to kind of force that issue. Like the stage and the time that they're ready to do so, they may be ready, or they may feel like they're not. But obviously we would encourage dialogue about that. And if we have to go to therapy or kind of talk about that experience, because I mean, when you find that out, then in my opinion, I mean, I had a father that was present but not present. So like you think of things like, why were they never there for me? Like, am I not good enough? Why did they give me away? And such like things go through your mind. So we're there to facilitate that dialogue and that conversation, but we don't necessarily want to kind of force it.
Right. No, I completely agree. My best friend growing up, she was adopted because she knew she looked different and she knew she was adopted, and she was always given the dialogue that her mom was in prison. Come to find out, 10 years ago, um, through private investigator and everything that her mom did, her mom lived an hour and a half away from us and worked for the department of the state that we lived in. Normal person, brilliant, had never been in prison, none of that. And the anger and everything that this grown adult then had to go through, because she always wondered, and her adopted parents, had done this to her. And so, um, that's why I asked the question. I was just curious on your take on that, because it's life altering, I think, for some people.
Yeah, and there's that kind of side where either the person, was forced to give the child away, or the child was in the system at that time, or they were in a good place. They, lost parental rights or then surrendered the rights, and then they turn their life around. And then, the child sees that, like, why didn't you kind of petition to possibly get your rights back or have some kind of contact or dialogue with me? So there's like all those situations that may happen, and we'll go through the child's mind at some point or another.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the last things I want to talk about, Roman, is, you said a high percentage of your foster kids are African American. So with everything that's happening in the world, how do you help them through this difficult time? Or, obviously they're little now, so they may not understand it, but how do you, moving forward, help them through this in in the diversity and such chaos that we have in our world right now?
Yeah, there's different like conversations in different spaces. I think obviously they're too young. Some of them don't even know what's going on because they don't watch
Yeah.
the news, and they should not be watching the news
Right.
at 2, 3, 4 years old. So they're seeing cartoons and stuff like that. Like if they see something mentioned in school or overhear something, and we need to start about it or have a discussion about it, like we'll have it to a certain extent that we think it's enough for them to understand. But then there's the other caveat. So I know other foster parents that are white that don't necessarily, because we haven't asked.
Mhm.
I mean, technically you can ask, which I don't agree with. We just want white kids because we're more suited to take care of white kids, or Hispanic kids, or black kids. And we just, anyone that needs help, we take in our home. And then there's the conversation that people have that we've seen online, that my wife has experienced, where it's like, you have white privilege, or like you have the savior complex. You want to save all these black kids because you're white, or take it in that kind of divisive direction. And it's simply the demographics of the county we're in. I live in the suburb literally 2 miles from Trenton, which is the state capital of New Jersey, which is the inner city, which has a high population of African Americans. So a lot of people that are actually removed or put in the system in terms of children are coming from, that main city with that main population. So it would be unfair to me. It would be like in the other end of it, to not take children of a specific race, or anything else like that. We've had African American children, Hispanic, white. We haven't had anybody in terms of like even being approached from other ethnic groups. And we've taken kids that we think we can help, because right now we don't think we're the right fit for teens based on the children we have now. And just kind of like situationally, we've taken kids with special needs and tried that. We actually had someone with special needs we had for 8 months. So it's like we just want to help. I don't think like in my case, like race is an issue. I feel like a child is a child, and the child needs love regardless of what race you are. But like if they see something or they hear something, we're definitely, proponents of having a discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so important that you say that, because, we're both on Clubhouse and I have been in rooms. They're not talking about foster cares, but they're talking about this. People want to help, or people want to be part of this specific group because of the ethnicity or whatever. And it just saddens me that we've gotten that far, in the world today, and everything, that's how we look at it. And I just see people as people, and I value where they came from and what they do. As long as they're good human beings and they're doing good for the world, that's all I care about. And Roman, I think that's what attracted me to you, is that you're just someone trying to make a difference in the world. You have an incredible backstory, and you have built this life to help other people and to get your story out to help men who are going through infertility as well. And you're helping all these foster kids, and you're just trying to do good in the world. And I think if we as humans can do more of that, I think that would it would change our life, completely change our life, and definitely our kids' life.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a mindset shift. So, like, I had the whole chasing titles, companies, money, and like I turned 30 and had a more shift in terms of mentality to a more heart-led entrepreneur. So the way I do business is the way I, handle some of these, issues that are near and dear to me, and some of the stuff I do in terms of advocacy, and obviously being a foster parent and how I treat relationships and other things. And it's developed over time. So like my emotional empathy has gotten better, my emotional IQ, which obviously led to how I approach situations as well.
Right, absolutely. So what is the one thing you'll leave today with? What's the one thing that people can leave today with? Like the Romanism, I guess. What's the one driving point home? If you're a skipper to the end, this is the last piece that you're going to hear.
Yeah, I would say if you want to do something, regardless if that's business or personal, like don't wait till tomorrow. You're not guaranteed till tomorrow, but if you do wake up tomorrow, you still have the opportunity to change your path. Regardless of how many things are stacked against you, you still have an opportunity to get out of that. And then in turn, from that journey, I would encourage you to highlight that, speak about it so somebody else can get out of that dark place as well.
Oh, absolutely. And Roman, how can I'm obviously going to put all this down below and on the page and all the social media stuff, but how can people right now, they've listened to this, they've heard this, they've seen it, they want to get in contact with you. How can they best get in contact with you or best learn about you and everything that you are striving to change in the world?
Yep. I mean, you can go to my website, company website, novazordigital.com. You can Google my name, Roman Prokopchuk. I'm sure you'll get my podcast because it's, in the name in terms of the
Mhm.
host, some of the interviews I've done, and my social media platforms that you can directly reach out to me. And I'm more than happy to answer your direct messages, emails, and continue the conversation if you have any questions or want to talk about anything else.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if you happen to be on Clubhouse and you ever get the opportunity to be in a room with the Roman when he's not chasing children around, please, 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 really turn up that mic, stop everything you're doing, and listen to what you have to say, Roman, because I'm telling you, you are an incredible human being and you just don't say it. You actually walk the walk. And so I appreciate you. And I am forever humbled that you came on my podcast, The Success You, today with me. So thank you so much.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity, and I appreciate adding value to your audience.
Yeah, absolutely.